Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 361, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, April 14th, 2025. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the subduedness of this podcast, and also the fact that I'm not using my normal equipment. Although these recordings, when I don't have my normal equipment, they still turn out pretty good. But I am recording this, and I'm a little tired. It was a whirlwind, but amazing weekend. Had a last-minute trip to go meet up with my parents in New Orleans. They have been making their way down here for a visit, and along the way, they've been making stops with their RV at different cities and, going to places they've never been before. And one of those places was New Orleans, Louisiana, which I have been to twice previously, once when I was in college and once about 10 years after, about 6 or 7 years after that first time in college I was there. But I hadn't been back in a long, long time. 2011 was the last time I was there. And so when I heard that was going to be one of the places they were stopping, I was like, maybe I can make this little quick trip and, see if I can make it there. And obviously I did, and had an amazing time. So, I flew there, quick 2-hour flight, by the way, if you ever want to go to New Orleans. If if it's a direct flight, I was, able to do that. So super quick, it feels like, and rented a car. That went pretty smoothly, and met up with my folks. So they stayed in their RV. I opted to get a hotel, and I would just go pick them up, and then we would drive around and go check out different things. So we had a great time. They kept saying they were happy I was their tour guide. I've been there twice, so I knew a handful of things, but not a ton. But it is a city I've always enjoyed and had a fondness for, and I know it's had hard times, especially post-Katrina. But it's still a really unique and special place. And, I think my folks enjoyed it too. It might not be a spot they want to go to frequently. But they both said that they enjoyed the experience, glad they got to do it. And certainly if the opportunity came up where, it makes sense for them, sorry, you can hear the cat in the background, they would, they would probably do it again. So in any event, I'll try to keep this, what we did, pretty short here. I showed them around the typical stuff. We drove around the Garden District, beautiful mansions, kind of like the South of Broad area of Charleston. We also, of course, drove around so they could see the Superdome and the basketball arena next to it, which is quite the sight to see. We went to Bourbon Street, and we went on Friday, during the day. So it wasn't wild, but it still was a Friday, even though it was an afternoon, and it still was Bourbon Street. So plenty of, hand grenades. The drinks were out and about. A couple of bachelorette parties looked like they were getting started early. But it was relatively quiet. If you've ever been there at night, and if you've ever been there at night during a big event, it can get a little crazy. But it was fun to show them, in the non-crazy time, some of the spots like Clover Grill, where they make their hamburgers under a hubcap. If you're unfamiliar, look it up. We went by Preservation Hall, where jazz is played by pretty much every night, and it's home of the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, who are incredible. And a couple other landmarks like Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop, which is believed to be the longest continuously running bar in the same building, the original building. Others may be older but have changed, their addresses or whatnot. Just pointing out those things to them. And, of course, we went to Cafe Du Monde, had to get some beignets and Cafe au lait. And they were quite the fan of the coffee and chicory combo that they do. But I was certainly happy to have it. We ate beignets and drank our coffee while looking at the Mississippi River out back of the Riverwalk area. And, what I was going to say before, unbeknownst to us, the city was hosting this French Quarter Festival, which was this gigantic music festival of all local acts, a bunch of stages just all spread around the French Quarter, mostly on the Riverwalk, but also, a block or two outside of that. So it was packed. There were so many people there. But everyone was in a good mood. The weather was great. You had people up on the balconies. Just felt like a very New Orleans-y weekend, especially because every corner we turned, there was live music, whether it was on the stage or, on Bourbon Street in one of the bars. Or a makeshift, set up on the sidewalk. It was just full of music, and it was incredible. So anyway, we also saw Jackson Square, of course, which is also where part of the festival was. We went to the French Market, which I hadn't been to before, which is kind of like the Charleston City Market, a lot of vendors, food, and things like that. Of course, we ate. We had po' boys. I had crawfish at Touffet. I'm trying to remember what else. Boudin or Bodin. I don't know how it's pronounced, but this type of like sausage. It's really good. I had that. A muffaletta sandwich. Just so much food. Probably too much food. And none of it's light. But it was just such a fun trip because we packed in a lot in just a couple of days, really. Got to walk around and take pictures, and it was just a really fun experience and a memory that I'm really going to enjoy looking back on. Just this random fast trip to New Orleans to hang out with my parents and show them some things I've told them about on my two previous trips, and also seeing them see things in person that they knew about or heard about, and, just talking about the city and learning about it. And so it was a lot of fun, and I'm sure I'm leaving out some fun details, but, at this point, I'm sure you don't want to hear it anymore. But if you're ever going to New Orleans, and if you have like no idea of what to do, I can happily give you a couple of places that we'd enjoyed. Certainly no expert on the Crescent City, but at least can give you some feedback on some things that myself and my parents enjoyed, depending on what you're looking to do in the city. So such a fun weekend, like I said, very happy and feeling fulfilled at the moment. Very, very nice, and again, a good memory. But enough about me bragging about my fun trip. It's time to get into the latest news. So I'm not going to go into details on this because I really want you all to read the article. In fact, I would be surprised if a good chunk of you haven't already seen it. I've shared it on the Holy City Center social media channels, but it's also been shared by tons of people. And I would imagine at this point it's been seen by tens of thousands of people, whether they live in the area or not. But it's this article that was making the rounds last week. The title is called "The Downtown Death Spiral. Charleston's Best Businesses Are Closing, and It's Not Their Fault." So for those of us down here, I think most of us know that we've seen this happen, whether it's the rising costs of, rent or leases, having a hard time getting staffing because it's tough for people to live downtown, and if they don't have reliable transportation, the liquor liability insurance premiums, and on and on and on. But people outside the city may not realize, you see a place close and you just assume, they probably didn't manage their business well, but that's not always the case. And it seems, of course, we're taking some folks just word for it without actually looking at their finances and knowing the day to day. But, a lot of businesses are just outright saying, some of those issues like the insurance are reasons they have to close. So in any event, if you haven't seen it yet, it's written by someone named Peyton Steele, who admittedly I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about them, but I think they did an amazing job with this article. It is on Medium, and again, even though I don't know anything about them, which means I don't know, exactly how much research they put into this. I don't know, their background as far as writing pieces like this. So there may be a couple things that maybe need to be tweaked with the article or, researched a little more, but it certainly looks like they did a ton of research. And just looking at it with just a passing knowledge of what's going on in this city, in this area, it does seem that, this would be an accurate representation. And what I'm talking about is there's a lot of numbers and breaking down like how much operations cost per month, what certain different types of whatever the business may run into. what the kind of average costs of those different things, whether it's insurance or other operating costs. Of course, it's not going to be the same for every business. So that's why I'm saying, like, these are kind of averages. And yeah, I'm sure there's some businesses or people who come in and be like, that's not how we do things. But it seems to be a pretty good medium, no pun intended, since this was published on Medium, of what is happening, kind of like an average. If you're an average business, this is kind of what you're dealing with. So I highly encourage you all to read it. It really breaks down not just those kind of broad strokes that I just gave it about, these are the issues they're having. It really breaks down, the cost of these things and what different costs are associated that you may not think about. For instance, even though I know this is a thing, I wouldn't have thought of it off the top of my head as far as operating costs. But credit card processing, that costs businesses a certain amount per month. In this case, Peyton says that the average is $2,900 to $3,200 a month in credit card processing fees. So things like that. So I highly recommend you go check it out. It's a fairly quick read, but obviously if you really want to dive into the numbers and things, you can really get into it for those people out there who love numbers and data and all that kind of stuff. So check it out. I've seen a lot of comments already on social media when I posted it, but would love to hear more, whether you agree or disagree with this post. But I think it's a really good read and pretty valuable. All right, and this one I will talk about a little bit more, but I do still encourage you to visit the link in the show notes so you can read the Post and Courier article about this. We've talked about Representative Nancy Mace a lot on this podcast, as you're well aware. She is the representative for District 1 in Charleston, which is a good chunk of you guys, myself included, a lot of people who are invested in Charleston. And you remember that amongst many other controversies and things going on, there's been a push, just like around the country with other representatives and senators, to hold town halls with constituents. And Mace just hasn't held one since Trump took office. There was some push by a local group. She claimed a bunch of different things about that group, that they're, crazy left lunatics. They don't live in the area. They're paid actors or whatever. So after getting that pushback, she finally did host a town hall on phone at the last minute with no advance public notice. So now I did say on a previous podcast, hey, if you don't feel safe holding an in-person forum, you don't have to. At least do a telephone town hall. So props to her for actually doing one. But as you move past the fact that she held one and hear the details, some of which I just mentioned, you realize, you didn't really do anything here. Like, this doesn't count at all for what people were asking you to do. So here are some of the details. It happened around 6 p.m. on April 8th. Nancy Mace on her social media channels put out, live telephone town hall, and it just started. Again, no advance notice was given to the public. Just the post that was like, this is happening at this moment, was the only post that came out. So in this telephone town hall, she claims that she doesn't hide from any questions, and that she promised that she wasn't the type of person who would have her staff filter out questions and only answer the easy ones. She said all this and, ended by saying, quote, "That's not how this is done. That's not the Mace way," end quote. Well, turns out it is the Mace way. 20 minutes into the call, after she, rambled and talked about whatever and, talked about all these people pushing her, to do these town halls, and again, talked about how they're fake news or whatever, all that rambling at the top of the call. Took about 20 minutes, and then she finally fielded her first question, which, as the Post and Courier pointed out, was actually not a question, just a comment on YouTube that was read out loud by a staffer. The comment was, "Please keep up the good work and please keep supporting Trump and don't back down." So again, not a question, just a comment on her YouTube. Not very long after she said she's not the type to have her staff just filter out questions and only answer easy ones. Now, I'm sure that comment was what popped up on YouTube during this town hall, but I mean, come on, it's just laughable that that's the first thing you do right after saying, we're not going to cherry pick these things. So in the end, she answers only 5 questions, or comments, as it were, over about a 30-minute time frame. So again, not really a town hall, not really what people wanted. Last minute, no notice, only 5 questions. It was about 30 minutes that she was online, and 20 minutes of that was her at the top, defending herself and stuff. So the Post and Courier does go into details about the questions that she was asked. 3 were about bills she has introduced previously or has co-sponsored. Once again, well, you mean your questions aren't cherry-picked, but you get 3 questions just specifically about bills that you've introduced or co-sponsored, and then the 4th at that point was that comment I mentioned before. There was another that asked her to consider banning TikTok, to which Mace said that she supports the First Amendment, and thinks that TikTok is good for small businesses because it can bring economic benefits. And then the only other question, a caller, and so to her team's credit or whatever, this one was clearly not screened beforehand. Basically, someone made a comment about her being a DEI hire. As we all know, the Republican Party attacking diversity, equity, inclusion, claiming it puts certain races or genders or sexualities above others. And so that's like, what they've been saying to try to get rid of it. And you may remember, I don't know, a couple months ago, Mace was getting these comments from Republicans, not just people trying to be snarky, people on the left or whatever, but actual Republicans who called her a DEI. Hire is the term you hear a lot, but really it's a DEI admission to the Citadel, because although she wasn't the first woman to be admitted to the Citadel, she was one of the first by 3, I think, but she was the first to officially graduate. So people on her own side, her party, were calling her a DEI hire, which you would think would get in her brain and say, oh, wait, that's really what's going on here. It's not actually about stopping programs that weren't working right or being run improperly. It's just about stopping, any minority of any kind from getting a fair shake. It obviously has not helped, because she got wildly defensive about that comment, got real mad at the person, and made some comment about, do you know how many women have been able to graduate from the Citadel thanks to me? That's not verbatim by any means. I'm paraphrasing. So just gets really upset, puts herself on that pedestal, and that's that. So if you didn't hear the town hall, you basically just did. That's what happened. I didn't get through the whole thing, but the Post and Courier's reporting did get the parts I missed, and I did not miss much, as you can see. Again, last minute, no advance notice. She rambled for 20 minutes about whatever. Took 5-ish questions. One was really a comment, so not a question. Most of them seemed to be cherry-picked by her staff, despite saying they weren't going to be. And then she got really mad when someone tried to point out the ridiculousness of DEI by saying she would be considered a DEI graduate or whatever it was. So, yikes. And that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you all had a great weekend. I hope you have an amazing week ahead. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. I'll be back with you later this week. Already looking forward to it. Until then, good night and good luck.